Hey guys, Wraith calling. Welcome back to Wraith's history lesson. I know it's been a while, but things being what they are, we are going to talk about the IS3 today and all its variations. And we're also, just for shits and grins, we're on Tundra, and this is the winter map. And this is Encounter. Anyway, on to the important stuff. So actually, there were two tanks slated to become the IS3. One was the Object 244, which was simply an IS-2 rearmed with an 85mm D5T 85BM, which is kind of a long barrel 85mm gun, but was never produced for service. The other version, which we know today became the IS-3, is the Object 703, developed in 1944. Left the factory in early May 1945 and became the terror of the Cold War for the early years. So it had improved armor layout, completely redesigned from the IS-2 series. It had improved layout. It had the famous semi-hemispherical cast turret, low-profile turret, improved protection, and also kind of really cut down on the headroom for the guys inside the tank. So, especially for the poor loader, who more often than not was knocking his head against the top. Also, there was not much room for the breech to move in the tank. So, gun depression and gun elevation was kind of limited, and this kind of put a limiting factor on the IS-3 and just how effective it could be sometimes in a holdout position. So, it also was the first tank had this famous prow, and I'm not going to try to butcher the Russian term for it, S-C-H-U-K-A, Shuka, which also just means pike nose, pike, for the angled pike formation on the front armor. Enemies got us in their sights. And it was a lot lower than current Western tanks provided, so it really was completely different as far as tank design goes, being a heavy tank and being low profile for a heavy tank, while as the Western and the Allies, the US, British, yada yada, all had higher sitting tanks. Remember, this is the end of World War II, so there were a lot of M4 stolen around that would not have been able to compete with this bad boy. For the first time this thing became on public display, which sent shockwaves through the Western world and made even guys like Patton wet their britches slightly, was in the September 1945 during the Allied Victory Parade in Berlin. These bad boys had a heavy tank brigade that actually made it there in time for the parade, and this thing caused a lot of hullabaloo as far as the Allies commanders at the time and as far as tank warfare went. Believe it or not, it actually did see combat. It had a relatively short operational life, but did see combat. So in the early 1950s, all of the IS-3s were modernized, and these became the IS-3M, which is the final version you see in World of Tanks. The final level thing you'll unlock is the IS-3M. And simply modernized. That's like a better fire control system, better optics, things like that. Not any huge improvements to the vehicle overall. But they were delivered to the Egyptians. There were about 100 IS-3Ms made it to Egypt, directly from the Soviet Union. And during the Six-Day War, a single regiment was stationed with the Egyptian 7th Infantry at Rafah, and the 125th Tank Brigade of the 6th Mechanized Division in Quintilla also had about 60 of these IS-3Ms. Meanwhile, the Israeli infantry and paratroopers had a hard time defeating these tanks with man-portable bazookas, rocket launchers, grenades, anti-tank weapons that they would carry as far as their infantry units went. But the Israelis also had the 90mm version M48 Patton tanks, thanks to the Americans. Now, the 90mm gun version, which we know in the game, was not the best game. Most of us prefer the 105 and M48s, but this one only had the 90mm. So they found head-on engagements against the IS-3s really gave them some fits to start with. At normal battle ranges, I don't know, maybe 1,000 yards, 1,000 to 2,000 yards is normal where tanks, modern tanks, start to engage. World War II was a little close. That was long range for them, but that was getting to the normal engagement ranges for tanks at the time. But there was a number of engagements between the 7th Armored Brigade of the IDF and the IS-3s at Rafah, and a number of M48s were knocked out in the fighting. However, in one engagement, a battalion of IS-3s against the 90mm armed M48s. 7 IS-3s were destroyed. They come to find out the slow rate of fire and the lack of mobility in desert conditions and the lack of difficulty maintaining the engines was a serious problem for them, and they didn't do well in the desert. The older school, even though they're modernized IS-3Ms, the fire control system was nothing like what the Pattons had at the time, and the Pattons were able to, through technology, outflank them, outmaneuver them, and put an end to them. The IDF did use the IS-3s for a while, just kind of experiment, see what they're up against, and ended up burying them and using them as fixed emplacements along the Jordan River. Or they were scrapped and gone away. China had a number of these and tried to reverse engineer them into the Type 122 medium tank. They scrapped it in favor of the dreaded Type 59, which was a copy of the T-54, 55 series tanks the Russians had put out. Leave it to the Chinese to monkey about with things. So where does that leave us in the game? Well, the IS-3 is a very good Tier 8 heavy tank. It has very good armor. The gun is pretty good. Again, that slow rate of fire. It is really fast for a heavy tank. But that armor does hold up well, even against some Tier 9s. Now, you don't want to go toe-to-toe with Tier 9s. And you really have to watch. This is one of those tanks that you have to learn how to properly get it hull down. Side scraping has to be done carefully, because if you over-angle it, that pike, that pointed nose, is going to make one of those sides flat, and it's going to be easier to penetrate. To make the best use, you just need to cover that triangular front plate just a little bit and cover it up, and you should be just fine. Now here we're finishing up this game here, and it's just the Arty left, so it's a matter of we're just chasing down the Arty. So while the IS-3s in real life had a very short operational life, they in World of Tanks terms, they actually served fairly well for league play, and they still do to some extent, although they're currently changing the format up a little bit for the next season. It is still a very good heavy tank, and it's arguably one of the better Tier 8 tanks in the game, heavy tanks in the game. Between this one and the T-32, it's kind of pretty close. Both have very good armor and very situational. And we'll see how the gameplay wrapped up here for me today. So I made some credits. 3,000 damage, 2,800 block. Remember that number, 2,800 block, 6 kills, first class mastery, steel wall. Give me a top gun for good measure. It's going to leave me with 1,600 base XP and 6 kills. Notice the little spa pans are up there. 5 kills, walked away, 1,700 base XP. Very good game for him as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Always, keep your powder dry.